My daughter was standing near her bedroom window when she noticed the camera move. At first, Sophie thought it was coincidence. She stepped to the left. The black lens on the streetlight rotated toward her. She moved to the right. It followed again. By the time I returned from my overnight shift at the medical center, she had recorded the movement on her phone. Mom, it was watching me. I wanted to tell her she was mistaken. Then, I went outside. The camera was mounted across the street, supposedly pointed toward the parking lane. As I stepped onto the walkway, the lens turned away from the curb and angled toward our second floor, directly toward Sophie's bedroom. I called Patricia Doyle, the HOA president. "It's a parking enforcement camera," she said. "Then why is it tracking my daughter's window?" "The system follows movement. My daughter is inside her bedroom. If you are not violating community rules, you have nothing to worry about." That sentence made my stomach tighten. Privacy was not something innocent people had to earn. That evening, Sophie received a message from a classmate. Attached was a screenshot from the HOA camera. It showed Sophie standing near her curtains. The image had first appeared in a private board group chat. Beneath it, Patricia had written, "Keep watching this house. They always give us something eventually." Sophie stared at me. They shared a picture of me? I looked across the dark street at the red camera light. This was no longer about parking. Someone had turned our home into a place where my daughter felt watched. I bought the house 2 years after my divorce. It was small, but it belonged to us. For years, Sophie and I had lived in apartments where every decision required permission. We could not paint the walls. We could not plant flowers. We could not replace a broken light fixture without calling someone. When I finally saved enough for a down payment, Sophie walked through the empty house and chose the upstairs bedroom because it received the most sunlight. "This is the first room that feels completely mine," she said. I painted one wall pale blue. She hung photographs above her desk and placed plants beside the window. In the backyard, I planted bamboo and flowering shrubs to create privacy. After years of tension, legal meetings, and moving boxes, the house became our quiet place. I told Sophie, "No one gets to decide how we live here except us." I believed that. Then Patricia began treating the neighborhood like a territory she personally controlled. She questioned visitors. She photographed trash bins. She sent notices over flower pots and delivery vehicles. I had opposed one of her proposed fee increases and requested copies of the HOA management contract. After that, the warnings started. A guest parked 2 inches over a painted line. My recycling bin remained outside until noon. A coworker waited in front of my house after driving me home from a night shift. Each incident became evidence that I was uncooperative. When the new camera appeared across from Sophie's window, Patricia called it community security. But security should have made us feel safer. Instead, Sophie began closing her curtains before sunset. She stopped sitting near the window. The room she once called completely hers no longer felt private. That was the first thing Patricia took from us. Not money, not property. The feeling that home was a place where nobody else was watching. Patricia introduced the camera system during an HOA meeting. She stood beside a presentation titled, "Smart Security for a Safer Community." The cameras would reduce illegal parking, discourage vandalism, and assist with traffic disputes. She promised they would record only streets, sidewalks, and shared parking areas. I raised my hand. Who can access the footage? Authorized board leadership. Which members? That information is restricted for security reasons. What is the retention period? The vendor handles storage. Is there a privacy policy? Patricia smiled as if I were deliberately delaying the meeting. Residents who follow the rules have no reason to fear security cameras. Several people nodded. Others looked uncomfortable but said nothing. I asked whether the cameras could rotate or zoom. Derek Sloan, the property manager, answered, "They are configured for parking enforcement." "That wasn't my question," Patricia interrupted. "The board has approved the system, but the minutes never showed a formal vote on pan, tilt, zoom, audio, or access rights. No resident received a map of the camera angles." No policy explained whether footage could be downloaded, shared, or viewed from personal devices. The contract was not released. A week later, workers installed the camera outside our house. The original mounting bracket pointed toward the curb. Then Derek arrived. He spoke with the technician and pointed upward. The camera was raised several feet. Its angle changed. From Sophie's bedroom, the lens was now clearly visible. I emailed Patricia. She replied, "The device is positioned for maximum coverage of community assets." Our home was not a community asset. Sophie's bedroom was not a parking zone. Yet every question was answered with the same words: safety, security, compliance. Patricia used those words like keys that opened any door. She believed that once she called something security, nobody had the right to ask where the camera was looking. For 2 weeks, Sophie documented every movement. At 6:40 in the morning, the camera followed me from my car to the front door. At 3:15 in the afternoon, it rotated when Sophie returned from school. At 10:22 at night, it zoomed toward a coworker who dropped off a folder. At 1:05 in the morning, it turned toward the driveway as I left for an emergency shift. It did not behave like a fixed parking camera. It behaved like someone was watching live. Sophie created a chart with dates and times. I compared it with Patricia's routine. Whenever her vehicle passed our street, the camera often moved toward our house minutes later. One Saturday, a truck blocked the fire lane across the street for nearly an hour. The camera ignored it. At the same time, Sophie stepped onto our balcony with a glass of water. The lens rotated upward. "That truck is actually violating the rules," she said. "Why is it watching me?" I had no answer that would make sense. One evening, I stood in the driveway and stared directly at the lens. It moved closer. The optical zoom changed. I could hear the faint mechanical motor. I raised my phone and recorded. "You told us this watches parking," I said aloud. "There is no vehicle here." The camera remained fixed on me. The next morning, Patricia emailed a warning. She claimed I had engaged in suspicious conduct near security equipment. I called her. "Someone is actively controlling that camera. You are imagining intent. It tracks people. It tracks movement. It ignores violations and follows my daughter." Patricia's voice hardened. "Your constant accusations are becoming disruptive." That was how power protected itself. The surveillance was not disruptive. Questioning it was. The person operating the camera was invisible. The person being watched was expected to prove she deserved privacy. I moved 2 large bamboo planters closer to the front porch. They were on my property and did not block the sidewalk. From the street, they reduced the camera's view of our front door. 3 days later, I received a violation notice. Obstruction of community security equipment. The initial fine was $250. An additional $50 would be added for every day the plants remained. I called Patricia. "How can plants on my porch obstruct a camera on a streetlight?" "The camera requires a clear sightline. To parking? To anything affecting community safety. My daughter's bedroom is not community property. You have no expectation of privacy in areas visible from outside. She is inside the house. The camera is not designed to identify individuals. You shared an image of her." Patricia became silent. Then she said, "I don't know what image you're referring to." I told her I had seen the group chat screenshot. She accused me of obtaining confidential board communications improperly. The conversation had turned completely backward. They had taken and shared an image of my child. Yet I was being questioned about how I discovered it. That afternoon, Derek sent another notice. It ordered me not to photograph or record the camera because doing so could interfere with security operations. Sophie read the letter. "They can record us, but we can't record the camera. That is what they are claiming. How is that fair?" "It isn't." She looked toward the closed curtains. "Can they make us move the plants? They can send notices. Can they take the house?" The question stopped me. The fines could become liens. Liens could threaten homes. A camera allegedly installed to protect property was now being used to intimidate us inside ours. I left the bamboo where it was. The next morning, the camera rotated around the plants and pointed towards Sophie's side window. The screenshot reached Sophie through a classmate whose mother had once served on the board. The mother had left the group after arguing with Patricia. She preserved months of messages. I read them at our kitchen table. There were photographs of residents carrying groceries, images of delivery drivers, pictures of visitors, screenshots of cars, comments about who returned home late. Patricia had created a list of residents who opposed her fee increase. My name was on it. Next to my name, she wrote, "Works nights, frequent visitors, watch parking and trash timing." Another board member replied, "Her daughter has friends over after school. That may create guest parking violations." The most disturbing image showed Sophie standing inside her room. Someone had zoomed through the window. Patricia wrote, "Keep watching this house. She will give us a violation eventually." Another message said, "Emily leaves after midnight. Easier to monitor then." I felt anger, but beneath it was something worse. Fear. They knew my work schedule. They knew when Sophie came home. They knew when I was gone. The camera had not simply collected rule violations. It had created a map of our lives. Sophie read the messages over my shoulder. They were discussing when you leave me alone? I closed the laptop. You are old enough to be home for a few hours. That's not what I mean. Her voice shook. They were watching when I was alone. I pulled her close. For the first time, she cried about the camera. Not because she thought it could see everything, because she now knew real people were behind it. Patricia had used the language of community safety to hide targeted observation. The same board entrusted to manage shared property was circulating private images for amusement and punishment. That night, Sophie slept in my room. The next morning, I contacted attorney Nina Patel. I was done asking Patricia to explain herself. I wanted the records. Nina listened without interrupting. Then she asked for every notice, video, email, screenshot, and date. She reviewed the camera contract and board minutes. The contract authorized parking monitoring in shared areas. It did not authorize zooming into homes. It prohibited personal use. It required access logging. It required privacy masking around windows. Audio capture was disabled by default unless separately approved. No separate approval existed. The system may have been installed for one purpose and used for another, Nina said. She sent a formal preservation notice demanding user access logs, device records, pan and zoom history, export history, downloaded images, group chat communications, administrator actions, board authorization, privacy policies, vendor warnings. The notice instructed the HOA not to alter or delete anything. 10 minutes after delivery, Derek logged into the administrator account. He began deleting local records. He removed user histories. He changed account permissions. He attempted to reset the camera configuration. Nina learned about it because the camera vendor maintained an independent cloud audit. Every deletion attempt created another permanent entry. When she called Derek, he denied destroying evidence. We were performing routine maintenance. 10 minutes after receiving a preservation notice? The timing was coincidental. Then you will have no objection to the cloud logs. He hung up. Patricia emailed residents that I was attacking the community's security system and forcing the HOA to spend money on lawyers. She presented herself as the victim. She did not mention the image of Sophie. She did not mention the private chat. She did not mention Derek's deletion attempts. Instead, she warned that residents might lose camera protection because one homeowner objected to enforcement. This was how institutional abuse isolated its target. Patricia turned my request for privacy into a threat against everyone else. But the cloud system had preserved what Derek tried to erase. And the access history was worse than we expected. The vendor's audit showed that Patricia had accessed the camera 430 times in 3 months. More than 180 logins came from her personal phone. Many occurred after midnight. Some lasted several minutes. Others lasted nearly an hour. The camera logs recorded direction, zoom level, screenshots, and exports. Patricia had not simply viewed live footage. She had manually rotated the camera away from the street. She had increased the zoom toward our second floor. She had saved 67 images. She had exported 14 video clips. The timestamps matched Sophie's notes. At 3:15 p.m., Sophie returned from school. Patricia logged in at 3:16. The camera rotated upward at 3:17. A screenshot was created at 3:18. At 1:05 a.m., I left for work. Patricia accessed the camera 2 minutes later and watched the house for 11 minutes. At 10:22 p.m., my coworker arrived. Patricia zoomed in on his license plate and exported a clip. This was not passive security, Nina said. It was active, targeted surveillance. The logs also showed selective behavior. When vehicles belonging to Patricia's supporters blocked the curb, the camera often faced another direction. When visitors arrived at homes belonging to her opponents, the camera zoomed in. Violation notices followed. The technology was not enforcing rules consistently. A person was choosing whom to watch. Derek had created Patricia's administrator account without board approval. It gave her the same control as the vendor. No second person had to authorize downloads. No one reviewed her activity. She had transformed shared security equipment into a private observation tool. I showed Sophie the access timeline. She stared at the number of logins. She checked the camera more than 400 times. Yes. Why us? Because I challenged her. Sophie looked toward her closed curtains. So she watched me to punish you. That was the social cruelty Patricia never considered. Her political dispute was with an adult, but the fear landed on a 15-year-old girl inside her own bedroom. Marcus Lee contacted Nina after hearing about the preservation request. He had installed the camera. The original plan placed it lower on the streetlight with a limited rotation range. Privacy masks were supposed to block windows and private yards. Audio was supposed to remain disabled. The camera would focus only on curbside parking. Derek changed the instructions during installation. He asked Marcus to raise the device. He demanded unrestricted rotation. He told him to remove the privacy masks. He asked for maximum zoom. He told him to leave the microphone active. Marcus warned that the new angle could see into nearby homes. Derek replied, "The board wants maximum flexibility." Marcus documented the warning in the inspection report. The final version stored by the HOA did not include it. Derek had edited the report. Marcus kept the original. It contained photographs of the approved angle and the installed angle. The difference was obvious. The camera was not accidentally facing Sophie's window. It had been deliberately positioned to see more than the parking lane. Marcus also provided an email. Current configuration may capture private residential windows and audio beyond the designated enforcement zone. Privacy masking is strongly recommended. Derek responded, "Do not include that language in the resident-facing report." Patricia was copied. She never objected. When I asked Marcus why he had stayed silent, he looked ashamed. The HOA was a large client. You knew it could see into bedrooms. I warned management. You also activated it. He nodded. I should have refused. His honesty did not erase the harm, but it mattered. Systems of abuse rarely depend on one person. They depend on professionals who recognize a problem and decide that warning someone else is enough. Marcus finally chose to become a witness. Patricia and Derek still believed they could describe the controversy as a misunderstanding. The special HOA meeting would make that impossible. The clubhouse was packed. Parents came. Retired residents came. People who had received camera-based fines brought their notices. Patricia sat at the center of the board table. Derek sat beside her. Sophie and I sat with Nina and Marcus. The live stream was active. Patricia opened with a statement about crime prevention. She said the camera protected families and discouraged parking abuse. She accused me of spreading fear. There is no evidence that any board member targeted the Foster family. I stood. Did you access the camera from your personal phone? Patricia folded her hands. Board security access is confidential. That is not an answer. I will not discuss operational details in public. Nina connected her laptop to the projector. The first line appeared. User, Patricia.d. Device, personal iPhone. Login time, 3:16 p.m. The room became silent. Patricia said board leaders had authority to review footage. Nina displayed the next lines. Pan, 42 degrees upward. Zoom, 8x. Screenshot created. Sophie's school arrival time appeared beside it. Patricia accused us of misinterpreting routine system data. Nina presented another session. Then another. Dozens of entries matched Sophie's movements and my work schedule. A resident asked why Patricia had accessed the camera after midnight. She said she sometimes monitored suspicious activity. What activity? I asked. My daughter standing in her own room? Patricia looked toward the board attorney. He did not answer for her. Derek tried to claim the vendor account automatically generated some records. Marcus stood. No, those entries require manual control. The confrontation shifted instantly. Patricia could no longer hide behind the machine. A person had logged in. A person had moved the lens. A person had pressed save. And that person was sitting behind the HOA microphone. Nina played synchronized footage. On the left side of the screen, Sophie walked toward her bedroom window. On the right, Patricia's account logged in. The camera rotated. The zoom increased. A screenshot was saved. Another sequence showed me leaving for work. The camera followed my car until it reached the end of the street. Then it returned to the house. A third showed a friend of Sophie's arriving after school. The camera recorded the girl's face and the vehicle that dropped her off. Patricia said she was monitoring unusual activity. I stood. What was unusual about two children entering a home? Patricia replied, We receive complaints about guest parking. No parking violation occurred. The camera operator does not always know that immediately. You were the operator. Her face tightened. Nina spoke before Patricia could interrupt. Security observes an area, surveillance follows a person. That sentence moved through the room. A father in the audience asked whether his children had also been recorded. An elderly woman asked whether visitors to her medical appointments had been tracked. A nurse said she had received a fine after staying with a resident during an emergency. Patricia insisted the camera was located on common property. Public visibility does not create unlimited authority, Nina said. You cannot install a shared device for parking enforcement, secretly point it into homes, save images of children, and call every use security. Sophie stood. Her hands were shaking. My room was the one place I thought no one was watching me. No one moved. Patricia looked down at her papers. Sophie continued. I stopped opening my curtains. I stopped changing near the window. I started checking the street before I went downstairs. Then she looked directly at Patricia. You made me afraid of my own room. That was the moment the issue stopped being technical. It was no longer about settings, contracts, or camera angles. Everyone in the room understood the harm. A child had changed how she lived because an adult in authority wanted political leverage over her mother. Nina displayed the private board messages. The first showed a photograph of Sophie near the window. The next showed my co-worker's license plate. Then came a list of residents who had opposed Patricia. Beside each name were notes about schedules, visitors, vehicles, and possible violations. Patricia had written, Keep watching this house. Another message said, Catch Emily blocking the curb and we can add another fine. A board member replied, She works nights. Easier to document when the street is quiet. Someone had posted an image of a resident carrying medication into his house. Another member joked that the man looked suspicious. The room reacted with disgust. Patricia claimed the chat was informal. Informal? I said. You used HOA equipment to collect the images. She said board members sometimes discussed observations. You discussed when my daughter was alone. That is not what the message says. It says I work nights. Patricia struck the table. You are twisting routine safety discussions into something sinister. Sophie stepped forward. You shared my picture. Patricia finally looked at her. The image came from a community camera. That doesn't make me community property. Several residents applauded. Derek attempted to leave. Nina reminded him that his deletion attempts were part of the record. The cloud audit appeared next. It showed that he began deleting logs 10 minutes after receiving the preservation notice. He called it maintenance. Marcus said no scheduled maintenance existed. The group chat also showed that camera-based violations were not issued equally. Supporters of Patricia received warnings. Opponents received fines. A message from Patricia stated, "Do not waste enforcement on people who support the board. Focus on repeat troublemakers." The camera system was not protecting standards. It was enforcing loyalty. Social injustice often hides behind claims of neutrality. Here, the machinery was neutral. The person deciding where to point it was not. Nina presented the evidence in 10 clear points. The contract authorized parking enforcement only. There was no valid privacy policy. No board vote approved audio recording. No vote authorized personal phone access. The original plan required privacy masks. Derek removed them. Marcus warned that private windows would be visible. The warning was removed from the final report. Patricia logged in hundreds of times. She saved images and shared them. Derek tried to delete records after receiving legal notice. Then Nina presented the enforcement statistics. Homes belonging to Patricia's opponents received camera-based violations at nearly 4 times the rate of homes belonging to her supporters. The difference could not be explained by location. Several homes were on the same street. The camera watched some residents and ignored others. A board member stared at the data. "We were told this was automatic." "It was not," Marcus said. "The operator chose the target and direction." Patricia blamed Derek. Derek blamed Patricia. Their accounts contradicted each other. Then an email appeared. Patricia had written, "Give me full control. I cannot rely on staff to monitor the right homes." Derek replied, "Admin access enabled. Logs remain internal." The room erupted. Nina faced the board. This system was not used to enforce rules equally. It was used to watch opponents until a violation could be found. That sentence explained everything. The camera did not wait for wrongdoing. It searched for it selectively. People who challenged Patricia lost privacy first. Then they received notices. Then fees. Then threats. Meanwhile, supporters were left alone. The injustice was not only that Sophie had been watched, it was that shared community funds had paid for a device used to punish dissent. Residents had financed their own surveillance. They had trusted board officers to use limited authority responsibly. Patricia treated that trust as permission to watch anyone she disliked. The board called an emergency vote. For the first time in 7 years, Patricia did not control the outcome. The board suspended Patricia immediately. Derek's management contract was terminated. All camera-based fines were frozen. The camera company locked every administrator account and preserved the cloud data. A privacy investigation was opened. Police collected the group chat records and deletion logs. The HOA's attorney advised the board to remove the camera pending review. Patricia stood. "You are dismantling a security system because one family is emotional." A woman in the audience answered, "No, we're dismantling your access to our lives." The vote to remove Patricia as president passed overwhelmingly. She looked around the room, as if she expected someone to defend her. No one did. Outside, Marcus climbed a ladder beside the streetlight. The live-stream camera inside the clubhouse showed the exterior feed. He disconnected the power cable. The small red status light disappeared. Sophie watched the screen. Her shoulders relaxed. The device itself had always been small. A black lens. A metal bracket. A cable. Yet it had changed how an entire family moved inside its home. The HOA canceled my fines for the bamboo plants. It agreed to pay my legal expenses. Residents who had been selectively fined filed appeals. Several demanded compensation for images shared without authorization. Patricia left through the rear door. Derek followed separately. Their authority had seemed permanent because it was supported by documents, passwords, and official language. But authority without limits becomes surveillance. and surveillance without accountability becomes intimidation. The camera went dark in seconds. Repairing the fear took longer. That night, Sophie still closed her curtains automatically. Then she stopped. She looked at the empty streetlight. Is it really off? Yes. Can they turn it back on? Not without a new policy, public approval, and independent controls. She touched the curtain. For the first time in months, she opened it halfway. The HOA adopted a new surveillance policy. Every camera had to face shared property only. Privacy masks were mandatory around homes and windows. Audio was prohibited. Personal accounts were banned. Downloads required approval from 2 independent users. Access logs were reviewed monthly. Residents received maps showing camera locations, angles, purpose, and retention periods. No footage could be used to monitor political opponents, personal visitors, or lawful activity inside private homes. Violations required independent review. Technology could support safety. It could not replace fairness. Marcus helped redesign the remaining system. Nina held a community workshop on privacy rights. I joined a small oversight committee. Residents who had once been afraid to question Patricia began requesting records and attending meetings. The biggest change was not technical. People stopped treating the phrase community security as an answer to every concern. They asked, who controls it? Who watches? Who is watched? Who benefits? One morning, sunlight filled Sophie's room. She walked to the window and opened the curtains completely. Across the street, the camera was gone. Only an empty bracket remained on the pole. Downstairs, I moved the bamboo planters back to the position I preferred. No notice arrived. No lens rotated. Sophie came outside and stood beside me. It feels different. Better? Normal. That was all we had wanted. Not secrecy. Not special treatment. The right to live normally, without an HOA president recording a child because her mother challenged a fee increase. Patricia believed people who had done nothing wrong should not fear surveillance. She misunderstood privacy. Privacy is not evidence of guilt. It is not a privilege granted by authority. It is the boundary that allows people to feel safe inside their own lives. Patricia lost to access logs, saved messages, an honest technician, a brave teenager, and a mother who refused to let intimidation be called security. The camera was installed to watch cars. It was removed because Patricia used it to watch people.